Our guest for this hour is in the studio. George Abasy is a policy advisor at Bolt, and he's here with us this morning. George, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome once again.
Thank you.
George, thank you for being here today. As you hear all these wonderful things, you're also here to tell us, for us to have a conversation about other things that are happening now, not in the air, and not in school, but essentially on the ground, and navigating the regulations of ride-hailing apps in the country. Thank you for coming. We're going to welcome you with a proverb. CT does that every day, and then you'll tell us what this proverb means to you and how you would apply it. Fair enough?
Good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Our proverbs for this whole week are from the Republic of Angola. When there is no enemy within, the enemy outside can do you no harm.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
What do you think about that, Joe?
Yeah. So basically it says that what happens within is more potentially explosive than what happens outside of you. And that you have much more control of what happens within than what happens outside. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can actually control it, and if you can,
yes,
then little damage will be done by who says what, who does what outside.
Absolutely.
Pretty straightforward indeed. All right. So again, we've been having a conversation about ride-hailing apps, and we're also getting into a season where a lot more people are going to be on the road, isn't it? Some of these regulations, sometimes we ask ourselves, okay, so who can do what? Who can, or rather, how is the market regulated? Let's just do an overview from the very beginning in terms of how the market is regulated and how we're making sure that everyday strides are being made to ensure that it is within a standard set requirement.
Yeah, So thank you so much. So basically the ride-hailing sector is regulated by the National Transport and Safety Authority, transport network companies regulations, in short, NTSA regulations, that attempts therefore to bring some sort of normalcy in the sector, because if you recall, we were not regulated prior to 2020, and then what then NTSA Act attempts to do is to give certain roles to the regulator, National Transport Safety Authority. Then it places certain responsibility on that, what they now define as transport network companies, ourselves as Bolt and our other competitors. Then roles and responsibilities of drivers, and then roles and responsibility of riders, passengers, if you want. And so then the regulations defines what a driver can earn from a trip, from what the passenger pays, and what the company therefore takes from a trip. If, for example, if it's 100 shillings, a trip of 100 shillings, the regulation states that therefore the company will take 18%, not more than 18%, caps at 18%. Then 82% then therefore goes to the driver. So that's how we are regulated. The regulations there regulates issues like safety and security, what the driver can do and cannot do, the status of the car, which car can actually be used as a ride-hailing car in Kenya. The regulations specify and defines clearly. The regulations goes ahead and define who is a driver in Kenya, what documents does a driver need, etc., etc. And the regulation defines and describes what sort of companies can be called a ride-hailing company in Kenya, whether foreign or local. So basically that. So from pricing structure, from safety and security, from duties and responsibility of different players, and all that is in that regulations. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. How do you make sure that they're kept?
So it's been... First of all, we try to be 100% compliant with the regulations, because then if you're not compliant, NTSA will simply deny you the license. But then it has had a checkered history, windy path, how these regulations came into place. And we've had this problem or challenge of how they were actually passed by the Kenya government role players. And that has been the problem. And that has informed, or that is the cause of most of the challenges that we're facing in this particular market. And that informs why we face so many driver protests locally, because then the regulation has not been adequate or sufficient to address the challenges that the market faces because of the hurried nature that they were passed without being compliant to the processes and the procedures that are dictated by the laws of Kenya. They were hurriedly passed for political expediency, and that has brought problems. That is the reason why we face problems. So if the regulations are sorted, the gaps therein are sorted, then we'll sort most of the problems that the driver community have been complaining about.
So we're talking about there having been something that is that should have been regulated, that should have been sorted out, that unfortunately has not been, and that's why we see some of the complaints that we are seeing at the moment, such as what?
Such as the pricing. The regulation attempts, for example, to make NTSA an economic regulator. NTSA is a safety regulator. By trying to define what the NTSA can charge as a price, it moves NTSA beyond their primary mandate of ensuring safety on the road, or of registering drivers, for example, of ensuring that drivers are compliant. And when we did raise this from 2020 in the National Assembly and the Senate, we were told that, wait, this will be clarified before it is passed. Secondly, for you to define what a pricing is, what a price can be charged, the Statutory Instrument Act says that the government agency or the ministry in charge must conduct what we call a regulatory impact assessment of the market to define the economic model and to give rationale why a certain price or a certain commission has to be capped. That did not happen. It was rushed. That process was hurried, rushed, and passed without going through the process. So we are in a situation where the companies are asked not to charge more than 18%. The drivers are asked they can only take 82%, but you are not told why. There is no study of an economic model or ride-hailing economic model that has happened elsewhere, including our neighboring country called Tanzania, where the commission cap is 25%. And there's a study that informed that 25%, for example. And so it is only Kenya where the ride-hailing sector is over-regulated. But even when it is over-regulated, we do not achieve what we had wanted to achieve of sustainable income to the driver community. Yes.
I find it surprising. I'm going to do some layman mathematics here. We start off with 100 shillings. I take 18. The driver takes 82. How is it then that this is not sustainable for them when they're getting the bulk of it? And this division, this 18%, is it everything that you take? Is it gross? Does it include everything? Or are there other costs that also come in that are not included in the 18%?
So therein lies the problem. So the 18% is not defined, the 82% is not defined in law. The regulation says the trip earning is X amount, please, the driver take 82%, company take 18%.
Okay, yes. Pause. There's the distance that you want to take.
Correct.
All right? There's the size of the engine of the vehicle, which means consumption.
Correct.
There's little details that every once in a while there's something called a traffic jam and you don't quite get to where you want to get at the time you want to get. There is the wear and tear for the vehicle. Then the person whose app it is also has to maintain the app. They also have to ensure that everything that they promise the people who ride or use their app for riding achieve what they're supposed to achieve. Again, these have costs to it. Do I hear you to be saying that the few things that I've mentioned, because I'm sure this is not all of it, are not detailed? So when one talks about 82 and one talks about 18, it's as open as a blank book.
Correct. So there's no, as required by the law, there is no an economic impact study to define what is the cost of staying in a traffic jam in Kenya. What is the size of the engine? What is called a trip fare? This particular study, for you to have passed a regulation that, regulates a ride-hailing sector, the Minister of Transport and which the policy organ and NTSA, needed to have submitted to Parliament the draft regulation, and attached to it, they needed to have supplied a regulatory impact study that could have informed or defined all these aspects, all those metrics, and says that in Kenya, for example, a trip from Mombasa Road to the CBD will cost 500 shillings based on the following.
Yes.
Correct? And then, therefore, the app company, please, you will take, say, 5%, say 7%, because from our study, this is what it is. Okay. But this was blanket. It was, with all tremendous respect, guesswork. And then correct. And then when these matters were properly raised, it was raised by all the players, including KEPSA, everybody else. That on what basis then are you saying that the commission capping will be 18%? There was no basis. So over time, therefore, we've seen this morph. From the driver strikes, we've seen this morph. We've seen even the Kenya Revenue Authority saying now, for the foreign companies, digital player foreign companies, you'll never now be paying not only DST, which was at 5%, the law has now been passed to say you'll now be paying significant economic presence tax, which has moved it to 100%. So this 100, like it was 1.5%, is now 3%, for example.
So it's double. It's essentially
double.
You've doubled it, so it's now 100% increase.
Yes. So there's nothing to inform pricing structure or pricing model ride-hailing sector in Kenya. And this is what has not been sort of clarified properly to the driver community groups in Kenya. I understand their apprehension, their anxiety, but we've not done a good work to properly enact a regulation that will take care of all the three players in the market.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and someone would beg to ask, the regulations that are put in place, someone would assume have followed a certain procedure, which here you say research was not done as what then informs the pricing. Yeah. And we've seen the strikes that have happened. Are you in court? Have you raised these issues with the ministry? And if you've raised it with them, including NTSA, what are they saying? Or what are they saying, pretty much?
Yeah, so it's been a journey. It's been a journey and a very interesting dance. We've raised them both with the previous administration and current administration, often jointly with other players and individually as a company, pointing out the gaps in the regulations. And I think the last time we were at the National Assembly Committee on Delegated Legislation, we were told that the minister was to do something, to do a study to inform the study, and that never happened. I think that was beginning of last year. This year we raised them in January. We tell them, look, guys, we understand your role as a government to regulate the sector, but there are these issues. You promise that you are gonna amend the regulation so that then they address the local market context. So it's been a dance back and forth. The driver groups thought that the problem was, I'm sure you're aware, the problem is the app companies. They have gone to court back and forth. Court keeps throwing them back either to the mediation committee. Sometimes they lose some of those cases because there's lack of understanding, and I think now, I don't think there's proper goodwill from the regulator to address the concerns that we have often raised a number of times for years now, that please address the issues that are in the regulations, because if you don't, and because of the macroeconomic factors, the drivers will continue coming to your door and to our doors. And if you want to kill a dog, give it a bad name. And because you'll give the app's bad name, the drivers will always say that it is the app companies exploiting them. And then when you put them to task, they're not able to point you to specifics that we are charging at least for more than 18%, or that, they can't say it because it is a tech thing. You can see this is the receipt, this is the invoice. So yes, we have raised it, and this regulation was passed without going through the proper procedures as stipulated in the law.
In the law. Does it have anything to do with it? I mean, because look, let's be honest, that when ride-hailing apps, the genesis of it saw significantly lower fares for a taxi ride.
Correct.
That was it. That previously, where you would be charged 3,000, 2,000 shillings from point A to point B, we saw that less than halved with the ride-hailing apps, which made sense for riders.
Consumers, yes.
For consumers. It made sense. We're like, okay, this is great. Because with that 3,000 bob, excuse me, that I would go to one destination. And if I had to do many things in a day, then it's possible that 3,000 shillings could take me, I would go where I needed to go the whole day and some change for tomorrow.
Correct.
So, I mean, it was fundamental in groundbreaking. Would it have anything to do with the fact that the prices were significantly lower? And so some of these drivers now saw that they're taking less because the price for the ride is less. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I'm not complaining about the fact that it's much lower in terms of cost. But could this be where they're complaining from? That if it was a higher fare, then they would earn more? No?
Not exactly,
Okay.
because there are various factors that inform pricing, and I'm not going into details. Distance, the car engine size, etc. But to answer your question, there are three levels of drivers. There's a driver who drives his own car.
Yeah.
His own car is fully paid for.
Yes.
And this driver, our studies have shown that they have sustainable income.
Okay.
Then the next level of a driver is the driver who drives a car, but has some credit support from banks and stuff like that. This driver has pressure, but not so much pressure. But the third category of drivers in Kenya that we've seen are drivers who drive rental cars, but these rental cars are on loan.
On loan, yeah.
So there are three players. So he has to pay the owner of the car, and the owner of the car has to pay the loan, and he has to pay himself. This driver we've seen over time is not able to earn sustainable income to support him, and hence the noise. So out of the 50,000 or 60,000 so drivers, there are those three categories of drivers. So the noise mostly comes from the drivers who drive the cars on rental, and those cars are actually on loan.
Yeah.
But what we strive to do is, number one, to create employment to as many drivers as we can. Number two, to help these drivers earn sustainable income from driving with us.
Yeah.
But number three is consumer affordability, to help the ordinary Kenyans, who move from one point to the other to have affordable rates as they go about their business. And so that's basically what the app companies attempt to do. But even as we want to comply with the regulations, and we understand the place of government to regulate the sector, for them to come up with a pricing model, then they have to do a study. That's the challenge we are passing back to the Minister of Transport, Roads and Transport, or NTSA. Please do a study to inform the so-called pricing model in Kenya. And if at all, and to answer the question that, is this market supposed to be price regulated?
Yes.
In a country such as ours? Because the experience elsewhere has shown that it is, in Africa, it is only Kenya actually that attempts to do this, and attempts to do this at a lower commission fare.
That attempts to what now? Regulate the price?
Regulate the price.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
because even in South Africa, there's no national regulation of app companies. It is from province to province. But even in South Africa, they have their own problems, but studies have shown that most of their drivers, 90% of the drivers, earn sustainable income on platforms, and the commission cap is not less than 26%. In our neighboring Tanzania, which is, just our neighbors are down here, the commission cap is 25%. At least it goes up to 30%. And when they stopped over-regulation, their sister, the equivalent of NTSA in Tanzania is called LATRA. When they stopped this over-regulation, they attempted to do the over-regulations that NTSA and Ministry of Transport has done, and companies such as ours and our sister company left the market for a while.
Yeah.
And when they called us back and we discussed how the regulation structure should be, based on global practice, then we have now seen over time that drivers in Tanzania also earning sustainable income. Yes. So the problem in Kenya is, number one, over-regulation. But even when we are over-regulated, we have refused to simply follow the procedure of passing an economic regulation.
Oh, and we talk about the fact that it's a regulated market. It's regulated.
Correct.
It is. But at the same time, there's some things which have to be abided by law. but are not being abided by.
Correct.
Why?
So in the sense that the particular law that we expect full implementation of was not properly passed. And so implementation, as we cautioned, was going to be a problem from the regulator front.
Okay, let's take a couple of steps back.
Yes.
George.
Yeah.
So when we say that it was not fully implemented, the law was not fully implemented, what was not implemented that would then now stop step 2, 3, 4 from taking place?
The purpose of this regulation, the purpose, the reason, the mischief, the reason why regulation was passed was particularly to regulate pricing. The law requires that if you have to pass any regulation that has economic impact in the market, in the country, the Statutory Instruments Act, I think Section 21 says, the government agency that is bringing that regulation before a committee of parliament must bring that particular draft regulation together attached to it a regulatory impact study. Before they do that, they have to publicize this particular, invite the members of the public to comment. They will say, for example, Ministry of Roads and Transport, NTSA, we have published NTSA regulation to regulate the ride-hailing sector, and we are inviting members of parliament, members of the public to comment on regulatory impact study or assessment that we are doing of the market. This never happened. It's on record. And we said, look, guys, let's not rush this. Let's conduct a regulatory impact study to inform all these issues we want to regulate, is to inform pricing stuff, because that is the real issue. That's the elephant in the room, if you want. And so this never happened. And they said the ministry admitted in a letter to us that, I think that was January this year, that we didn't do this, we intend to do this. That was December last year. That has never happened. In a letter to us from the ministry, said, now we invite your comments. We wrote comments. I think there were to involve the drivers.
Okay.
So this has never happened. And this is the problem since these regulations were gazetted by the former minister, Macharia. When Macharia's successors came in, Waziri Murkomen, and he said, okay, fine, I understand. And these issues can be resolved. This was never resolved. I think the Ministry of Roads and Transport attention was elsewhere. They deal with bigger issues, airports and stuff like that. I think this, in the scale of things, this could be a smaller thing for them.
Fish, okay.
Yeah, until the strikes begin to happen. So until and unless this issue is revisited, we'll continue having these pressures in the market. We'll continue having this misunderstanding from the drivers. And unfortunately, the passengers sometimes will bear the brunt, because you get into a cab and the driver want to vent from point A to point B to sort of, with respect to emotionally blackmail the passenger. By the time you arrive at your destination, you feel like you've been harassed to pay more.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that is not earning sustainable income. So that's the practice some of the drivers have taken into. Some of the driver groups have created some Zelo, where they communicate with themselves in an attempt also to intimidate the passengers.
How do you then come in as Bolt, as the platform? Because what do? You're in a cab, you're halfway through, and somebody's actually doing that. And if you don't pay, they blacklist you, which is what they've done. In this community group of their communication, they now blacklist you and say, well, if you see a request from such and such a person, this number, don't pick up their request. How do you do that? And at the end of the day, we say we're on the Bolt platform. So
what we've done over time is it has been a multi-pronged approach. When a passenger complains, we basically deactivate that driver, because that's what the regulation says, that if you act outside the regulation, the driver is deactivated. And then there are all these appeal processes. But number two, I think in one of the meetings we attended, those particular driver groups, they were told by competition authority that you cannot attempt to set prices, it is illegal. That particular group was clearly told. And you've seen that over time this practice has reduced. But if we do not revisit and resolve the issue of an economic model of pricing, and NTSA is told how to regulate pricing in the sector, what is the commission cap, what informs what, how does X inform Y, Z, other countries have done it, then we will not, unfortunately, resolve these issues that are happening in Kenya. And some of those will, they will now start becoming trade unionists. They will start, sort of trade unionists championing for rights which are not properly understood.
Yeah.
It's just lack of understanding.
Let me ask this question. When you have your partners in the business, the cab drivers with their cabs, before you register someone as part and parcel of your outfit, what are the minimum requirements that they must have in terms of A, they as a person, license, and etc., B, what state must their vehicle be in?
Yeah, so thank you so much.
Is also clearance from police a requirement?
Correct. So the driver must have a valid driving license from the regulator, from NTSA. The driver must have a PSP certificate. The driver must have, because of safety and security, a police clearance certificate from the DCI. And the vehicle must be in good shape. And the only way we know the vehicle is in good shape is an inspection report from the regulator. You must upload, an inspection report from the regulator.
How regularly?
So the compliance happens like annually. So like if your PCC, police clearance certificate, expires, the system automatically logs you out of our system, and until you get a new PCC, or until you get a new driver license, or until you get a new inspection report from the regulator. So app companies are almost totally dependent on what the authorized government agencies do to ensure that we onboard, number one, drivers who don't have criminal elements on our platform, because that's how we get the PCC from DCI. We are not a security agency, we are a private company. For us to have a proper vehicle on our platform, this vehicle must have an inspection report from the regulator, and that is done by a government authorized agency, and they must have a driving license that also must come from a Kenyan government authorized agencies. So as soon as you have this, you upload them on our system, we verify NTSA as a portal, then we onboard you as a driver, or we onboard your vehicle as one of the vehicles on our platform.
Let me read something that one of your users has written. I've experienced filthy and roadworthy vehicles, wrong number plates, a different driver from that on the app, you name it. That's a comment.
Yeah.
So what you're saying in essence is that Bolt really has very little say as to, you look at the certifications that are provided for you. You don't have an option where you physically examine the vehicle.
No, for you to be a driver on our platform, you have to come to the driver engagement center. They look at you physical, number one. But for the vehicle, we have a driver. We often have driver engagement exercises. Like I think last week we were in Wairimu, where when vehicles are onboarded, over and above the physical, the documents verification processes, we look at the vehicle itself. So there have been those complaints that certain vehicles are not quote-unquote roadworthy, and certain drivers come who are not necessarily the same drivers.
Yes.
And I think that was last year, and over time it is extremely, I'll be surprised if a driver comes this year, if a driver comes who is not a driver. And one part of the responsibility that we place on our riders or our consumer is, number one, you must ensure that the driver is the driver that you summon, and the vehicle is the same vehicle number plate that you know what's on the platform. So it's your responsibility. We often persuade the riders that, please, number one, it must be the vehicle. If it is KDK, blah, 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 it must be that number plate that comes to pick you. And it must be the same driver. And when you get, hey, John, if it's the John, hey, John, nabari yako, before you get into the car, for example, that's part of the responsibility to ensure that you are safe and secure. So that there's no lapse. And number two, there's always an SOS button, either before or when you're on the trip, should anything happen. And our customer support will almost react immediately.
Let me just bring this up as well. And there are situations where you've ordered, a request has been accepted. Hello, Aseto, unaenda wapi? Imekuitisha pesa ngapi? Kata, sikuji uko. Cancel. You know, it happens not once, several times. Also, situations where you've requested a ride and you get inside and the driver shows you an amount, not even a price list from the app itself. Like, is this what your app has shown you? And no, that's not what my app has shown me, because you don't have access to my data and my information. How can your customers react to such incidents?
First of all, that is fraud, and that should be reported immediately. Because those are some of the drivers giving the business, in the country a bad name. And so that one you simply say no, because the role of the app company is to connect you, to link you up to the driver and the car to take you to your destination at a price that is already on your platform. And if the prices should change for whatever reason, it will come to your own app and say this price may change because of traffic or because whatever reason, or because you change your destination. It will tell you on your own app. So that's the role of technology companies, to link you to the driver so that you pay the price that is already predetermined. Or if it has to change, it's because you yourself has changed the destination or something else. There's other factors. But that has to be shown to you so that there's certainty and predictability. And in your mind, there is no level, some measure of anxiety of what will happen. So a driver who does that's fraud, you report. You simply say no. So there were attempts to do that. You simply say no. And we encourage our consumers just to say no, because the price is already determined based on various factors, and the driver is actually not making a loss.
Okay.
Some others actually even abuse you, I added.
How do you do that? In that case, is it an immediate reporting while you're still while you're still in the vehicle?
Car, you go in the car and you report.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is likely to happen in that instance? You're in the vehicle. So you've reported. What happens?
So the customer support will get in touch with the driver, and if it is a matter which is in the red line, obviously there will be some action taken immediately. But such drivers, over time, we have agreed with the government of Kenya that they cannot be on the platform. We cannot trust the lives, security, and the welfare of consumer on such quote-unquote criminal elements on the road.
Yeah, I think on the same as well, in your regulations to your drivers, because we're talking about regulations, the regulations that come from the government and the regulations that
on terms of
you also have. Yes. Now, here's a question where I am going from point A to point B, and I know based off the regularity, how many times I use a certain route, this has traffic, this does not have traffic. Can I tell the driver to use a certain route that I think is favorable to me, or must they follow what the app tells them?
You can actually suggest a particular route, but if they insist, then they can follow the app. It's still up to them. They will have to complain. But even if you are to change the route, if you are using Google Map, for example, or Bolt or whatever map, whatever you change the route there, it is captured immediately that now you're on this route. It will take you this minutes to arrive. It's technology. You can't lie to technology. Yeah.
Can you envision a favorable ecosystem where all of the elements are operating in a balanced form? Where fine, the drivers are all right with the percentages that they're receiving. The riders don't have much in terms of too much, and then the platform itself is then able to operate within that community as well as with the regulatory body. Can you envision an ecosystem where kind of everything is working in tandem? And what would be necessary to have that kind of situation?
Yes. So it is possible for it to happen. It has happened. It's happening elsewhere. Yeah, and we are no exception. And we are priding ourselves as a country where we are the high of Africa out there, where all big technology companies are actually coming to Kenya to be hosted here. So this can happen. What then it requires is a multi-stakeholder engagement between the app companies and the government and the drivers to agree on a consensus of what will be the proper regulatory framework for ride-hailing sector in Kenya. That, number one, will ensure that we create sustainable jobs for the driver community, and these sustainable jobs result into sustainable income that they can earn from the platform. But number two, we'll also ensure that the app companies run their businesses without continuous hindrances and propaganda and smear campaign and stuff like that. But number three is also ensure, because we pay taxes here, the government hand taxes from our existence here. But most importantly, we offer consumer prices affordability for most Kenyans who, have to move from one point to the other in this particular cities in Kenya. So it is possible. And the way it is that we have to define what is the regulatory framework, what is sustainable driver income, what is the commission cap, if at all. We have to define, and we have to also to decide whether in future or now is it possible to amend the law also to make NTSA, if we must regulate prices, to make NTSA economic regulator, because as it is today, it is not an economic regulator.
In the absence of NTSA as the economic regulator, who then regulates the prices that the customer is charged?
Well, that's a very important question. Kenya is a free market economy where market forces regulate pricing. In most, unless it is defined in Competition Act, most of the services that are offered in Kenya, the prices are determined by the market forces. Unless it's a price or a commodity defined as regulated by the Competition Authority. I've looked at the transport sector, even Matatu. The large chunk of NTSA work is Matatu industry. And even that is a free market economy. The prices are determined by the market force.
So I'm asking this because exit NTSA, they are not regulating the prices. Therefore, on your app, who's setting the percentages? 18%, 82%, who's setting that?
So what has happened in other countries, for example, in countries where we don't have economic regular, is that it's basically market forces.
Okay.
And our internal studies have shown, even for other competitors, that it is 25%, 27% commission cap, 30% commission cap. The drivers actually earn more in unregulated markets than in Kenya.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are getting to a time where also we're seeing a lot of, and I think the question has been, so when you when there are these promotions, when they are, they're discounts and they're significant. Remember, we've already said we're coming from a place whereby there's more affordable ride-hailing, right? But then we also see discounts and the promotions. And then I again, like what Dennis was pointing to, I see what the price is on my side, and I've been awarded a promotion. I've been awarded a discount, 35%, 20%. The question then arises, how do you maintain the 82% that goes to drivers, and I have a promotion of 20% for 15 days off the rides that I take? And they often complain and say, no, on my side it's 1,000 shillings. I say, well, no, on my side it's 850. I pay the 850 because that's what's on my side. How do they maintain their 82% even with the promotions on this side?
I mean, it's simple. The discounts are borne by the companies.
Okay.
What companies I know. So it is not accurate. It is not truthful. They're not being truthful by telling you that they take care of that.
I'm telling you, that's what they say.
That's what they say.
That is what they say. They say, now, how do I go?
And it's unfortunate that some people can be that dishonest. They raise that with the ministries, government regular players in a meeting, and they are to admit in that meeting that all those discounts, it is the companies that take care of those discounts. We are told that a trip to, for example, to town is 600 shillings. Charge George 200, pick 200. The rest of the money, the 82%, he will withdraw it from his app. Yeah, so they're not being truthful. I think it's part of the spin to emotionally blackmail the consumers and to smear the app companies. All discounts are borne, as far as I'm concerned, for our business, by our business, and even for the other players, because we've been in consultative meeting with other players, with the government in the room, all government agencies that are relevant, and it has been proved that all the discounts.
And they know this.
They know this.
Yeah.
They're just being dishonest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where do you think that's born from?
I mean, the culture of, unfortunately, like what I tell you, like what has been happening in the market is, over time, there's this unfortunate culture of greed that has cropped up, that we transitioned from the traditional taxis to ride-hailing sector, and I don't think there was proper orientation of what it will entail. so that people still have the old mindset that is the old traditional taxi. I mean, technology has changed the world.
Yes.
So they have to move in with the changes. So you have to agree that at the end of the day, I'll make my 6,000 shillings from moving around. There's no parking. Because there was a time that they were discussing parking within CBD, but we were told, it can only be called drop-off and pick-up zones. It cannot be parking because you're not supposed to park even at the airport. You're supposed to be moving around and picking customers, receiving trips and stuff like that. And internal studies that we have shown that the drivers actually earn sustainable income based on those particular categories that are highlighted earlier. Yes.
Okay.
For me, the thing that indicates that the drivers actually do earn a living, because if they suffered as much as they claim, they would opt out.
Yeah.
We remember when we had the chairman of one of the associations here, and we asked the same question. If it is that bad, why do you continue? If it's that terrible, if these people are predatory and they're making your life miserable and they're sucking the lifeblood out of you, why do you stay with them?
Why do you continue?
Yes, because I assume that your entry into this understanding is voluntary.
Yeah.
What do you hope? What do you see the future? Let's look, 12 months down the line, regulations in place, hoping for implementation properly. What do you see?
If we do what is right, at least in the local context of passing a proper regulation, then I see less noise in the market in the coming year. Like, please, and we're not saying it must be 18%. That's not what the app companies are saying. We're just saying, please do a study. The study, an independent study from the government themselves, will point you to what is a favorable commission cap. And I'm therefore hoping that the regulator and the Minister of Roads and Transport will come to a point and say, enough is enough of this protest. Let us sort out this matter on behalf of the citizenry of Kenya. So that then consumers are fine and drivers are fine and we don't have disruptions in the market and on the roads. And so that then that's how the propaganda may not stop completely, but is less and less, so that then if it is 16%, 15%, 20%, people know what to expect when they go into a trip, and it is defined in law. And it is informed by something.
Right.
Correct.
Look, it's always good to get these insights and also for, the greater community to understand what's really going on. So we want to thank you for being here this morning. George Abasy, policy advisor at Bolt, having a conversation this morning about regulatory activities in the ride-hailing app sector. Thanks again for being part of Kenya's biggest conversation this morning. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.